This case takes place in Tasmania, Australia in the year 1995. Victoria Ann Elizabeth Cafasso was born on the 8th of June 1975 in Surrey, England. Although she grew up in Italy, she held dual British and Italian citizenship and was raised for the most part in Italy. Victoria was described by those who knew her as intelligent and adventurous. She inherited her father's brains. He was a lawyer, and he hoped that one day she too would follow in his footsteps. But her mother owned a travel agency, and this is possibly where her lust for adventure came from. Victoria had a deep passion for travelling, and she would sometimes go off with her mother to various locations. She had what could be described as an affluent upbringing, and she enjoyed her life very much. She was well loved, and she got along with her family dearly. Victoria had a promising future ahead. She was fluent in Italian, English, and French, and she was academically gifted. Her father was incredibly proud when she told him that she wished to pursue a career as a lawyer, and when she was old enough, she attended university in Italy and studied law. Although during her studies, the urge to travel just grew too great. At this time, Victoria was around 20 years old. She went and spoke with her family, informing them that she wanted to travel to England to stay with her grandparents. Her father was somewhat disappointed in her decision, but there was nothing that he could do, and so Victoria left for England. It was in England where she began to make plans to travel Australia. Victoria had a cousin who lived in Tasmania. Tasmania is an island state of Australia, located around 240 kilometres south of the Australian mainland. So whilst in England, Victoria made a phone call to her cousin, Simon Howard de Salis, telling him that she would love to travel to the land down under, and wondered if she would be able to stay with him for the duration of the trip. The two cousins knew each other, but not too well. They had only met twice in the past. However, Simon was more than happy for Victoria to come and visit the island of Tasmania, and he agreed to let her stay. Victoria then booked her flights, packed her bags, and made her way to Australia. After a long flight, she touched down on the 6th of October 1995. Waiting for her at the airport was her cousin Simon, along with one of Simon's friends. Together, they began driving to where Simon lived, the town of Beaumaris. Beaumaris at the time had a population of just a few hundred, and mainly consisted of fishermen, surfers, and retirees. Simon was renting a small cottage in this location, and this is where Victoria stayed. En route to Simon's home, the three stopped at Shirley's Lookout, an area which offers views of Beaumaris Beach. It's here where Victoria was introduced to three local residents. One of them was Hilda Jackson. According to Hilda Jackson, the two became friends almost instantly. She would later say that she immediately warmed to Victoria and described her as a lovely and thoughtful girl. She said she was very, very pleasant, very gentle, softly spoken, intelligent, and very attractive. Everyone remarked how eerie similar Victoria and Hilda looked alike. Now here's the weird part, or at least it will seem weird soon. Apart from this, Victoria didn't really have much interaction with other residents of Tasmania. She didn't get chance to, as in just a few days, she would become the victim of one of Tasmania's most brutal and frustrating murder cases. She arrived on the 6th of October, and in less than a week, she would be dead. On the 9th of October, Victoria visited Hilda Jackson's home, the girl she instantly became friends with. She spent around half an hour there before leaving. The two women spoke about spending a day together at some point. Following this, on the same day, Victoria attended a small private birthday party for a woman named Mandy. Mandy was the owner of the cottage that Simon was living in. Later that night, Victoria took a leisurely stroll around the area before returning home again. The following day, she did the same. Just a walk around the area to grow familiar with her surroundings. But now we arrive to the 11th of October. That morning, Victoria awoke early. At 8:10 a.m., Victoria informed Simon that she wanted to go for a walk to the beach, and she borrowed a small carrier bag from him. The two then ate breakfast together and had a quick chat. By 9 a.m., she left the cottage and headed towards the beach. By 10 a.m, witnesses reported seeing Victoria sunbathing approximately 700 meters south of the beach entrance near Surfside Hotel. In fact, another person saw Victoria walking alone to the beach, Hilda Jackson. Hilda saw Victoria walking about and planned on later making her way down to the beach to have a run. She hoped to bump into Victoria later on. This would be the last time she was seen alive. On the beach an hour later, Hilda started her run. She started jogging in the opposite direction to where Victoria was seen sunbathing. Hilda decided on that day to run into the wind, because then the run home was much easier. Hilda has since said that this decision haunts her every single day, because if she ran the other way, she may have deterred the killer. At around 1:30 p.m. that day, a woman named Margaret was walking her dog along the familiar stretch of the beach near Freshwater Creek. Margaret was a local, and this was her usual spot to walk her pooch, something that she would do daily. As she was walking, enjoying the sea air, Margaret spotted something unusual in the distance, something on the water's edge. As she walked closer, it became more apparent to her what she was looking at. The partially unclothed body of a young woman lying face down in the sand, being gently pushed by the waves on the shoreline. The body appeared to be lifeless. Margaret was of course overcome with shock and dread. She looked in horror, trying to process exactly what she was looking at. After a few seconds, she turned and quickly ran to the nearest house she could find, looking for help. She approached her neighbour's home, which belonged to two men, and she knocked on the door. She informed the men about what she had seen. Wanting to make sure that Margaret wasn't simply mistaken, the two men accompanied her to the beach to check. After all, this was a small town, where nothing much ever happened. Together, the two men walked her back to the beach, where they confirmed that this was indeed a human body. It was at this point that the police were contacted, setting in motion an investigation that would shake Australia to its core. The body was quickly identified. Victoria's family, including Simon, were informed of her tragic death, and it was apparent that this was a murder. Police, detectives, and forensic specialists arrived on the scene. An examination of the crime scene was conducted, where several points were noted. Some items that belonged to Victoria were found nearby: a bangle, sunglasses, a shoulder bag, sand shoes, a ring, and a watch. These items were spread all over the crime scene. Victoria was found partially unclothed at the water's edge. She had suffered 17 stab wounds, with 2 fatal injuries to her heart. Her head and face had also been stabbed. Defensive wounds were discovered on her arms and hands. This led detectives to conclude that in her final moments she desperately and bravely attempted to fight off whoever this attacker was. 3 of Victoria's teeth were also broken, indicating that she had been struck with a blunt object during the attack and was struck with some force, as the front part of her face was broken and slightly caved in. The attack was incredibly violent and prolonged. Around 55 meters from where her body was found, investigators found signs of a violent struggle. Notably absent were her bikini bottoms, a towel, and the t-shirt she was wearing. None of these items have ever been recovered. From this point, the police made mistake after mistake. There were multiple footprints visible in the sand in the area where Victoria was killed. One of these was believed to potentially belong to the killer. Despite this, only one footprint cast was taken by the investigators, even though there were more visible footprints nearby. And this single cast that was made was of poor quality. Forensic experts later found it to be inconclusive, as the impression lacked necessary detail to make a positive match to any suspect's footwear. A well-preserved shoe or footprint could have offered clues about the perpetrator's foot size, their walking pattern, and the type of footwear they wore. This could have been used to match later suspect shoes or known visitors to the beach. Tragically, the cast was useless, and no follow-up footprints were preserved. And shortly after finding Victoria's body in the water, and before conducting a proper crime scene investigation, the police moved her body and covered her in a blue tarp, so locals who were coming to the scene couldn't see her. However, this introduced foreign objects to the crime scene, contaminating it and tampering with evidence. The crime scene was also not promptly cordoned off, leading to locals accidentally contaminating the crime scene. The police failures don't just stop here. Crucial photographic and video evidence was not captured, and the state forensic pathologist did not attend the scene, delaying the collection and the analysis of the forensic evidence. The entire initial investigation and the collection of evidence was so poorly handled that the police essentially aided the killer in his escape. So, who did this? Who killed Victoria, and why? The killing in broad daylight shocked the quiet coastal community and led to a wide range of theories. One was an Italian mafia hit due to Victoria's father being a lawyer in Italy who prosecuted the mafia, but there was no evidence to support this. There was also rumours of a local serial killer. This was because just 2 years before this murder, a tourist vanished without a trace. This tourist was named Nancy Grunwald. Nancy was a 26-year-old German tourist who vanished on March the 12th, 1993, whilst cycling along Tasmania's east coast. Nancy arrived in Tasmania on the 6th of March 1993 after travelling from New Zealand. She planned to explore the island by bicycle and hired a bike on the 9th of March. Over the next few days, she journeyed through St. Helens and stayed in local hostels. On the morning of the 12th of March, she departed the St. Helens hostel, intending to continue south along the Tasman Highway. The last confirmed sighting of Nancy was around 11 a.m. After this, she seemingly vanished without a trace. The case to this day remains a mystery, and some believe that the two cases are linked. Following the discovery of Victoria's body, Simon, along with Hilda and other people Victoria met during her short stay in Tasmania, were questioned by the police. However, they were quickly ruled out and had sufficient alibis. People began pointing the finger at each other in the community. People became terrified that they themselves could be falsely accused of the crime, and many were terrified that they were living amongst a killer. Victoria's family flew over from Italy and stood on the beach where their daughter was killed. After some time, and after an autopsy was conducted on Victoria's body, Victoria was flown back to Italy for a burial. When Victoria's parents got back to their home in Italy, they found a letter in the post. They opened this letter, only to see that it was from Victoria herself. Just days before she was murdered, she had written a letter to her parents, telling them that she was enjoying her time in Australia. Over the coming investigation, over 300 people were identified as potential suspects, but not a single person saw or heard the murder taking place, despite it being in broad daylight on a relatively busy beach. Just weeks after the murder of Victoria, the Port Arthur massacre was carried out by Martin Bryant. The police suspected that Martin Bryant could be a suspect. However, he was ruled out. The police eventually narrowed to a few key persons of interest. 4 men, nicknamed by investigators and the media as the fisherman, the biker, the doctor, and the surfer. These 4 men were the main suspects. It's believed that Victoria was attacked and murdered at around 11:30 a.m. So let's start with the surfer. This suspect is an unknown man who emerged as a crucial person of interest based on witness sightings at the beach around the time of the murder. Investigators believe that he may have been a surfer in his 20s who was present at the beach that morning. Witnesses reported seeing a young man in his mid-20s, around 6 foot tall, fit with a surfer appearance. He was running across the beach at around 11 a.m. on the day of the murder. A light-coloured Subaru station wagon was spotted parking near the beach at around the same time. The police suspect that this man was its driver. Whoever this was left shortly after the murder had taken place. This surfer has never been identified or located, and despite widespread publicity, he has not come forward, and the car he was driving has never been found. Next, we have the fisherman. The fisherman's name is Tony Kirkland, and early on he became a suspect due to reports of disturbing behaviour in the area. In the weeks before Victoria's murder, Hilda Jackson had a strange and disturbing encounter on that very same beach. Hilda met a strange man near the dunes. He walked towards her slowly before asking what is the quickest way to get off the beach. However, according to Hilda, he did this in such an unsettling manner that it made her feel deeply uncomfortable. Shortly after this, Hilda discovered that the underwear she'd left hidden in the dunes while she went for a jog had been stolen. And when she returned home after this jog, she discovered that her neighbour's clothing line was raided and the women's clothing was stolen, suggesting that someone was stalking women in this area. The police later identified this man as Tony Kirkland, a fisherman who lived in a nearby town. He was known to the police for various reasons. The police wondered if Tony Kirkland intended to actually kill Hilda Jackson that day, but may have targeted the wrong woman, mistaking Victoria for Hilda. They were of a similar age and appearance. Other people who saw the two later said how similar the two women looked. Just a few years later in 1998, the fisherman was served with a restraining order by a 17-year-old girl who accused him of stalking her and threatening her with violence. During the investigation, the fisherman seemed to insert himself oddly into the case. A magistrate later remarked that the fisherman, quote, relished being a suspect. He seemed to enjoy the notoriety and found it to be thrilling. However, he ultimately denied any role in Victoria's death, and as of right now, the police don't believe him to be the killer. Next, we have the biker. The biker was named Gary Holmes. He was another local man who became a prime suspect. He wasn't an outlaw biker gang member, but he had a motorbike and the name stuck. The biker lived in the area and acted strange following the murder, which drew police attention. On the day Victoria's body was found, witnesses noted that the biker acted very strangely. He appeared like, quote, a zombie when the murder was brought up in front of him, which some interpreted as shock or even guilt. He also gave conflicting accounts about his activities that morning when the police interviewed him, raising suspicion that he was hiding something. But perhaps the strangest part is that he had injuries on the day of the crime. Police observed blood, scratches and bruising, including on his face and arm. He claimed that these injuries came after he punched a hole through a door, injuring himself after having an argument with his ex-wife. Investigators were skeptical. However, it seems, for the most part, the biker was ruled out following an extensive investigation. And finally, we have the doctor. Dr. Roman Hassel was a Czech-born gynecologist who was living and working in the area at the time of Victoria's murder. He became one of the most scrutinized suspects in the case, and he has denied any involvement. In October of 1995, the doctor was a physician in St. Helens, a town just a few kilometers away from where Victoria was killed. He had arrived in Tasmania only weeks earlier, and he arrived after being released from prison for threatening his second wife with a knife. And it turned out, the doctor had quite the fascination with bladed weapons. Early on, the police discovered that the doctor had no corroborated alibi for the morning of October the 11th. He claimed that he was at home sick on the day of the murder, but not a single person could verify his whereabouts during the critical time window, and he had scratches all over his face. He initially told investigators that he had never been to that beach, but later, a girlfriend came forward and alleged that the doctor admitted to her that he was on the beach that day, directly contradicting his statement to the police. And one of the doctor's ex-wives came forward in 2008 and said that she asked him point blank if he killed Victoria, and his reply was, "Maybe I did, I don't recall." The doctor has never fully been ruled out. Since the murder, his medical career ended amid a scandal and was disregistered after multiple malpractice findings. The Tasmanian police have indicated that they would still welcome new information related to the doctor. Investigators have said that they would not be surprised if the doctor was responsible for the crime. Yet, as of right now, there is no definitive proof against him. And with this, the case went cold. Tragically, Victoria's father passed away just weeks after her murder, and they were buried right next to each other. The police sometimes review the case from time to time, and in recent years they have used new technology to find any missing clues, but so far there has been no convictions. Investigators have said that there are still several people remaining on their radar, and none, including the 4 I just mentioned, will be ruled out until the case is resolved. The case had a profound effect on the community. Hilda Jackson later said, "People here used to leave their doors unlocked. Everyone trusted and knew each other, but then, all of a sudden, everyone ended up with a question mark over their head. People began to leave the area. Marriages even broke up, as some people just didn't want to live there anymore, especially as the killer was never caught, and likely amongst them." One expert, who is a leading coroner, examined the case. This expert believes that even if the police were able to find the killer now, there would be no conviction. The amount of evidence lost in the initial stages of the investigation would mean that there would be too much reasonable doubt, meaning that whoever killed Victoria would likely never be found guilty. The expert went on to say, "The killer will only be caught if it was a confession, and that's just not going to happen." The case of Victoria is just beyond tragic. Her family have never recovered from what happened that day, and the fact it's still unsolved leaves many in the town with a sense of unease, especially because the teeth which Victoria lost during the murder have never been found, which likely means that someone, somewhere, has them locked away, keeping them as a trophy to remind them of the day that they killed an innocent woman and tore apart a small town.